It's just so crazy because just one slight change in just dial color changes up the entire look of the watch. Hi guys, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about white dial watches versus black dial watches. I'm going to talk about the differences between the two, pros and cons, and my personal thoughts. So let's get into it. Okay, before we get into the video, if you want to see some more fun watch videos and you want to keep this channel going, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and make sure you hit the bell notification so you don't miss when I drop my next video. So let's get into it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the two oh so classic colored dials. White dials versus black dials. The two most classic colored dials there are out there. And I'm not sure if this is a popular topic or not, but I often find myself when choosing out a watch if I actually want the white color dial versus the black color dial. And I think the difference between the two, although very small and literally a change in black or white, can make a huge difference in how the watch looks, how you think it looks, how it sits on your wrist, how it works with your color palette, how it works with your wardrobe, and just how you like to style things. So when I often pick out a watch or when I'm looking for a watch, I find myself, if it comes in black or white, debating on whether I want the black or white one. So today we're going to dive into the differences between the two, perhaps pros and cons if they're relevant for you, and for me, my personal choice and preference when it comes to the two colors. Okay, and in terms of what I'm wearing today, which I think will give away my personal preference, but I'm wearing my Rolex Datejust 41mm white dial. It's in stainless steel with a white gold fluted bezel. This one actually got discontinued not too long ago, but it is one of my most precious babies. She's so clean, and when I say clean, I mean honestly actually my cleanest watch. She's so classic. I tend to pull out this watch when I attend formal events and weddings because it really is just that classic touch. So she is with a Jubilee bracelet. Oh, she's one of my favorites. And I think this is a dead giveaway to my personal preferences coming up, but let's get into it. Okay, so for today's video, I have two amazing examples for you guys to compare white and black dials. I have the Rolex Pepsi in both the white dial and the black dial. So on my left, on your right, we have the white dial. We have the Rolex GMT Pepsi with the red and blue bezel. This one's white gold with the white Meteorite dial. So the dial itself is cut from a meteorite, obviously. It's a super, super special piece, but I wanted to compare it because this is the only Pepsi that actually comes with a white dial, at least current models. So this is the white dial Pepsi, and then on the other side, we have the more classic Pepsi, I'd say. It's the Jubilee bracelet with a red and blue bezel, of course, but this one has a black dial, and this one's in all stainless steel versus the Meteorite comes in a white gold. Okay, so differences between the two. On the left, we have the white gold, white dial Meteorite Pepsi. On the right, we have the stainless steel black dial Pepsi. Both amazing Pepsis. They are different materials, so obviously on the left we have white gold, on the right we have stainless steel, but honestly on the exterior they kind of look the same. You wouldn't really know unless you've examined them closely and you know your models well enough, but all in all they're both Pepsis, just honestly just a difference in color. So white versus black, and we're going to dive into the differences between the two, pros and cons, and what I think. Okay, and for another example, I'm also going to pull up another set of watches to compare black and white dials, just because I feel like one example is not good enough, and just to show differences between other watches. There is also the Royal Oak. So here we have two AP Royal Oaks. On the left, we have a 38mm stainless steel white tapisserie dial Royal Oak with blue subdials. And on the right, we have a 41mm stainless steel black dial with white subdial Royal Oak, and they're both chronographs. The one on the right is actually my husband's. It's too big for me, obviously. The one on the left is 38mm, it's mine. So I pulled up these two as well as great examples. I realized that mine on the left with the white dial has blue subdials and it's not quite the monochromatic look we're looking for, but honestly it's the closest I can use for a white dial to compare to my husband's black dial. So we're gonna also compare these two. They look very, very similar, obviously, with the only difference really being in dial color, white versus black. So we're we're also gonna do this. Okay, so to get this list started on pros and cons and differences between white dials and black dials, we're first gonna start off with the most obvious difference, and I think the most standout feature when it comes to the two is that I find white dials to be much brighter. Obviously, white versus black. White stands as a much brighter color. So, for example, this is the white royal oak we have here. It's a bright piece. It's, you know, against the stainless steel, it speaks much brighter. Versus a black royal oak. It's definitely, it's like the dark side. It's much, much darker. And when you put them side by side, you can totally see what I'm talking about here. The white dial is much brighter, the black dial is much darker. And that's just an obvious difference. And that really is just a personal preference, whether you like a brighter look versus a darker look, what type of outfit you're going for, what your wardrobe speaks to, what kind of aesthetic you're really going for. I mean, I feel like that's a very obvious difference. Bright versus dark. And same goes with the Pepsi, and you can definitely see that here. The white is much, much brighter, and the black is obviously much, much darker. So it really is just a personal preference, which one you prefer, a brighter dial versus a darker dial. They're different aesthetics, different looks. So yeah, that's the first difference, pro or con, whichever you perceive to be the pro, whichever you perceive to be the con. That really is just the first difference when it comes to black versus white dials. And I don't know, I feel like this is a very small note, but I find that when it comes to black and white dials, in terms of photography, I find that white dial watches photograph a little better than black dials. And I'm talking specifically from far. So obviously, if you photograph either watch, they look absolutely stunning up close, and you can see really the details of both. But when you're photographing from afar, especially for my females out there that love their whole outfit looks and to pull together their bag, their outfit, their shoes, and their watch. In terms of a photo from afar, where you really can't see the details of a watch, but you just want to include the watch in your photo, I find that white dials really do read and pop a lot more and are more visible in a photo than a black dial. Black dials, I feel, tend to get a little, oh, this is upside down. I feel like black dials tend to get a little hidden in photos taken from afar versus a white dial. They really do pop to me. Of course, the white one's gonna stick out much more, especially for a photo taken in the dark. So that is something to keep in mind if you do want to get a watch that really stands out and is very stark. Okay, and the next point that I want to make about black versus white dials, it's not much of a pro nor a con. I guess it really is up to personal interpretation when it comes to this point. It's that I find that white dials tend to be much cleaner and crisper versus black dials tend to be a bit more muted. And again, this is just my personal opinion. Don't take what I say to be set in stone and concrete and absolute fact. This is just my personal opinion, but I do find that white dials are much cleaner and crisper. So this is the Meteorite Pepsi with the white dial. I don't know, I just think it's much cleaner, much crisper, and it really is just because of that white color versus a black Pepsi. You can see immediately when I pulled up this Pepsi, it's much more muted because of that black dial. It's darker, obviously, but it's much more muted and subtle to a point. So you have this stark, clean, crisp white dial versus a muted, dark, subtle black dial. And side by side, here we are. It's just so crazy because just one slight change in just dial color changes up the entire look of the watch. You have clean, crisp, stark white on the left, and you have dark, muted, subtle black on the right. Again, I don't think either are a pro nor con. I'm not saying that either feature is a pro nor con itself. I think it is just personal preference, and I just wanted to point that out. Okay, the last point that I want to make in terms of pros and cons and differences on black versus white dials is that I personally think that white dials tend to be more feminine, at least overall. I'm not talking about in every single scenario, but I find that in general, overall, when it comes to a variety and span of watches, I find that the white dial options tend to speak more feminine and the black dial options tend to speak more masculine. For example, for this 38mm Royal Oak, I know that this is a unisex watch. I see a lot of men sporting this, but I comfortably wear a 38mm just fine, and this is one of my favorite APs. I can't lie that when I look at this one is much more feminine than my husband's Royal Oak with the black dial. Same exact chrono, of course this one's a 41mm, but even just looking at it upon first glance, and especially putting it side by side next to my Royal Oak, it is definitely much more masculine. And that's why I say that I find white dials a little more feminine and black dials a little more masculine. Now of course that is not to say that women can't wear the black dials, that is completely personal preference, but I think that this white dial speaks a little more feminine and this is a little more masculine. But it really is just what type of energy, what type of look you're going for. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to speak on my personal thoughts if it came down to a white dial versus a black dial watch. I would likely always choose a white dial watch over a black dial. That's just me. I tend to prefer white dials over black dials. There's something about a white dial to me that, as I mentioned in my previous points, I find it much more clean, stark, bright, even a little more legible, and feminine especially. That's not to say that I won't wear nor buy black dials, but I tend to choose white dials if they are available. I much prefer white dials in terms of the feminine energy, but also for my color palette and my wardrobe and my aesthetic, I wear a lot of warm and bright colors. I will sport an all black outfit, which is very New York of me, but I find that I always pull it together with a bright watch. But that's just me. And that's all. I just wanted to do a very simple video on the differences between white versus black dials, pros and cons potentially. Whether you consider each point a pro or con is completely dependent on what your personal tastes are and your personal preferences, so it really is an individual choice. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on whether you prefer white or black dial watches. When it comes to watches, do you always go for one color or the other, or does it really depend on the watch for you and what it looks like? If you liked the video, give it a cute little thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below for more fun watch videos. Follow me on my Insta for all updates, and I'll definitely see you guys real soon on my next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to talk about the oh so classic Okay, let's try this again because I'm looking at the camera and I'm not looking at the lens.